Okay. Testing, testing, test. 1, 2, 1, 2, test. Okay, that's working. Boom. That's just out of the shot. Good stuff. Let's just bring that in here. Sure MV7. Romeo, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. That Peter Piper picked a pepper. Peter Piper picked a pepper. Good stuff. Okay, let's bring it closer. That's a crying baby. We've got to record around that stuff. Anyway, let's get stuck in. Hey, it's Tim here. In today's video, I'm going to be finally covering a topic and a question that I'm commonly asked, which is how do I make videos on this channel? Now, this is actually a really hard video to do because the way I've made videos has essentially been a process over the years, and it's very hard for me to show you what that's been like because it's changed over time. So what I'm going to try and do today is try and do two things. The first thing is show you how anyone can record videos and put them out on YouTube and just get started, even with no gear, just a laptop and a phone. And then the next thing I'm going to do is show you my own process and basically all the detail that goes into how I make videos. That is going to be far more technical and it's basically going to be a little bit longer. So if you want to skip around, look at the timestamps, that's what they're there for. But otherwise, if you want to watch every single nitty-gritty, this is going to be a long video. I'm not going to apologize for that. The other thing I want to also do is I also want to sort of set some context, because if you watch this video and you walk away from it and the only thing you see is the fact that the production level is high, for example, or that I have a lot of equipment that is maybe unattainable to you, then again, I'm hopefully going to prove to you that that's actually not necessary. Most of the work that goes into this is actually in the planning and the thought that goes into the video rather than the equipment itself. The last thing I'm going to say is that when people ask me how I make videos, I always in my mind have this sort of thing in the back of my head which is sort of shouting at me, that's the wrong question. Because the more important question is why I make videos. Because if you understand why I make videos, you would never ask how, because long story short, I'll do whatever it takes to get the video out there. How is just a matter of figuring things out. It's just a puzzle in many ways. So the why is the most important question. But again, that's very much another video which I'll release tomorrow after this has been released. Okay, I've said enough. It's time to get stuck in. Okay, so the first step when doing any video is just planning it through. It doesn't matter if you know the subject really, really well, or if you think you've done the video before, or maybe you've trained something and your idea is to just go to the keyboard and hit record and re-record whatever you did in training. It doesn't work. The reason is, video is a very different format, especially depending on where you share it. Let's say I wanted to make a video for Instagram. I'd have to make it in a completely different way to if I made it for YouTube. And I'd have to make those two videos in a completely different way for if I made it for TikTok. They have very different styles and people are expecting different things. So the number one rule is know your audience on the platform you're recording for. In my case, that's exclusively YouTube. Why YouTube? YouTube is the only platform that pushes 4K 60 FPS video to absolutely everyone in the world for free. The second thing is it's also got the biggest audience. So if I want to get my videos in front of people, YouTube is just frankly the simplest and best way to do that. And the best thing is it doesn't cost me a single cent. Imagine hosting a 4K 60 frames per second video multiple times to hundreds of thousands of people. That's essentially what YouTube does, at no cost whatsoever to you. Now, obviously they do have a monetization mechanism. They put ads on videos and that helps pay for that hosting. But fundamentally as a creator, I don't have to foot up that cost up front. So this makes it a very low barrier for getting content out to people, unlike other platforms like Vimeo, which will charge you as soon as you hit certain storage limits. The other thing to be aware of is your audience is normally looking for something, okay? They're normally looking for a question. So when I make a video, I have to ask the question, which is this video actually useful to anyone? And so the best way to answer that is to actually go to Google and ask. So one of the things I always do is I'll go to Google, I'll just go to google.com. And if I'm about to make a video, for example, on level detail calculations, I'll type the question that I think someone might start with. So what is an LOD? And I'll hit enter, okay? And you'll see that I didn't give it any sort of context. So of course I need to give it a context of Tableau. I'll hit enter again. And this is where Google becomes really powerful, because I'm not interested in the first hit, I'm not interested in the second hit, but I'm interested in what people also ask. So the first one is, what is an LOD in Tableau? Great. What is an LOD in Tableau with an example? Interesting. So that's the second most asked thing. People want examples. So that's another piece of information. What is a fixed LOD in Tableau? Now I know what fixed LODs are, but it's interesting that people are searching for specific things. So those first 3 results tell me that people want to know about LODs. It's a typically searched for thing. They want to have examples and they want to explicitly know about the different kinds of LODs. They've asked for fixed, but that's the most commonly used one. So you've got to assume that if they saw include and exclude, they'd also want to see those. What is the difference between include and fixed LOD in Tableau? Surprise, surprise, that's the 4th most video. Now there's another trick here. If I click on this title, Google figures out that I'm interested in this question. So it goes and repopulates the questions again, okay? And it starts giving you unrelated topics. For example, what does ATTR mean in Tableau? What is the ZN in Tableau? And if I click on those, it keeps going and it keeps adding more and more context. So if you're stuck for video ideas and you're sort of wondering what's going on, Google's not just surfacing these because, you know, it thinks they're funny or it thinks you should know about them. It's surfacing them because they're some of the most commonly asked questions based on the things I'm clicking. So LODs will come up, attribute function will come up, ZN will come up. And you'll notice that I make videos on these exact topics. I've actually been focusing on functions for a reason, because that is actually what people are asking for. A lot of people aren't actually looking for the full built out examples because not many people go into the detail of actually explaining explicitly how those functions work. So that's how I get ideas for videos. And that's how I sense check whether the video is even worth doing in the first place. I also often get videos about, you know, Tableau server. People always ask for those. And I don't prioritize them because, simply put, the opportunity cost of setting up a server infrastructure, setting up good examples that are easy to follow that people can actually relate to, and then have those videos be watched by what would eventually be a very small audience doesn't quite make sense at the stage that I'm at. At the moment, I only have so much time, so I've got to make the content that helps the most amount of people. And once that's out of the way, we can then start making more niche content and helping people who have more niche subjects. So this is how I start with all topics. I start here on Google and I just go through. Now, once I have those ideas, that's not enough. You need to plan the video. So one of the things I use is a tool called Notion. Now, this Notion tracker here, this page here, is essentially a list of all my published videos. And it's quite an old list. I've deliberately filtered back to, you know, where I was in roughly November. And you can see that there's actually quite a lot of information. This is by no means an original idea. I actually got this from another YouTuber called Thomas Frank. Let's just go to his channel. I've got the video up here. I'll link to this video, but you'll see that he actually has a very similar setup in his Notion. And I took this approach from him because essentially when I started a YouTube channel, I thought there must be other people who have this problem of needing to release videos every so often and haven't quite figured out how best to do it. And then there must be some YouTubers who do this all the time and do know the answer. Thomas Frank is one of those people who's a productivity coach. He does a lot of content on his YouTube channel about productivity. So I went to his channel and you can tell that I got some tips because I don't just use his Notion setup. In fact, I actually use his Notion template, but I also use this really familiar circle here on the bottom right-hand side. That's not original. I saw this on his channel and I looked at it and I thought, wow, he's got such a great relationship with the viewer and it does so many things. And I didn't think about doing this until I saw him doing it. And then that's when I started researching how best to do it, okay? So take inspiration from other people who are already fixing the problem, including my channel. There's lots of other channels doing exactly the same thing. It's the best way to go. Now, the other thing I've done is I've also modified it. Another YouTuber that I like to follow is another lady called Sarah Dici. She does a lot of creative work. Her channel is really, really good. But you can see she's also got this really nice Notion setup. Again, I encourage you to go check out her video. It's really, really cool. And she's customized it. In fact, she's simplified it to just what she needs. But let me show you the power of what this Notion setup does. Let's just go back to Notion. And you'll see here I have a video. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend to create a video here in the publish section. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a video. I'm just going to call this what is an LOD, a video I'm recording soon. And we hit enter. And when we do that, it just creates a line here and we can put in a few bits of information that could be useful to the user. But essentially what we're really interested in is what comes after this step. When I click open, it gives me a blank slate and it gives me some characteristics that I can use. And I can essentially fill this out. But this isn't where the gold dust is. The gold dust is in this template. When I click on this template, it will apply a structure to this video. And essentially it will apply this template to this page. And so if you just wait for this to load, and if we now look at this, you'll see that it's loaded very quickly and we can see this list of content. Now it's applied this, and this is very much taken from Thomas Frank's setup. So I haven't changed many of the things because I actually quite like the structure. I don't use all parts of this, but I actually aspire to use all parts of this because there will come a stage where this structure will actually be very useful. It splits this out into research and notes. And if I have some research and notes, I can just go and put the notes there. And it means that whatever I'm doing, I'm always focused on that one thing. If it needs a script, I can come in here and write a script. Not all my videos require a script, but sometimes it does need a script. And so I can actually write that in here and keep all my notes and everything in one place. Okay. Now, if I just go back one, the great thing about that structure is I can apply it to multiple items. And in some cases, I don't need that structure because this topic is either very short or is very simple. So actually I can apply my standard sort of mental model of how this video should be done, and I can make it work really, really well. Let me show you some videos that I did do in the past. Map layers, which was a new feature recently released. If I click open, you'll see that this page also has its own template already applied. And if I go into the research and notes, you'll see that I actually took the notes from the beta process. So this is where I put those notes just so that I can make sure that I've got a reference that's not on the Tableau website, and I can go back to this and add notes, and I can do things like comments. There's not much of that here. Sometimes I might go look at other blogs, other videos, other bits of content that other people have created, and I'll put that in here as a reference to basically say, look, if you're going to make this video, it needs to be either better than this other content, or you need to add some additional value or angle that doesn't already exist. It's just an important part for me because if someone has done the video really well or has done the content really well already on YouTube, what's the point in adding more noise? Why not champion that content instead and make something else that is missing in the community? Okay, so that's one little step. Let's go back here, and now you can see I've had this pretty much for all content, and I have this pretty much going up to today. Now there are a few occasions where I won't use this, and that's literally when the idea is literally a 5-minute video and I can top and tail it without really having to apply any thought. But what eventually happens is at the end of the month, I go on YouTube and I grab all the titles and I put them into this table when it's all done, so everything's in one place. So that's how I plan my videos. That's how I think about the videos. That's how I research what's actually good to record and what doesn't need recording. And then I put them in here, and now we're off to the races. This process everyone should do. It doesn't matter if you have a production studio or if you've just got a laptop and a phone. Whatever you're trying to do, you should always try and do the content to the best of your ability. And I don't think you can do that unless you think through the video before you hit record. And again, this is one of the best ways to do that. So you don't have to set something as fully fledged as this. You can keep it simple, but whatever you do, grab a pen and paper and make sure you plan your video. Okay, we've planned our video. Now the next bit is recording. Now for this, I'm going to do it in 2 formats. The first one is going to be the super simple setup, the setup anyone can do with a laptop and a phone. That's it. Let's get stuck in. Okay, so it's time to hit record. You've got the content planned. You're wondering what's next. I'm a Mac user, so the first thing I'll show you is how to do that on a Mac. Without any software, you can always record the screen on a Mac. Then simply go to QuickTime. Just go to QuickTime, and when you do that, it pulls up this thing called QuickTime Player. And actually, it looks sort of daunting because there's nothing here. There's nothing that says record the screen, right? But if you go up here to File and you select New Movie Recording, you can actually record the screen from any device, including your own laptop. If you plug your laptop in, if you plug your phone in, you can record the screen on the phone. If you plug a tablet in, you can record the screen on your tablet, and it can of course record the screen on your Mac. Now, QuickTime is actually the best screen recorder on a Mac because it's not using any additional software. It's using the native software inside of macOS to record the screen, which means you get the best quality picture out of the macOS system. So if you're on a Mac, QuickTime is hands down the best way to do this. Every other paid option typically uses QuickTime to record the screen anyway. So the only things those things are going to add is a little bit of polish and a little bit of better quality. Okay, so that's how to do it on a Mac. The other way you can do it on Windows, if I just go over to my Windows section here, you'll see that you actually have something called a Windows game bar. If I just hit Command G, it actually opens up this sort of gaming window. And actually one of the features on this is to be able to record the screen. Now, I can't do this because I'm running a virtualized version of Windows, but that's absolutely one way you can record the screen. It's very easy. You don't need to install any software and you're ready to go. What if you want to use some software? Well, let's go back to Mac. and I'll show you the tools I use. I use a tool called Clean Shot. Now, when I click on the screen, you'll see that this red dot emanates from this cursor. And also when I hit a keyboard shortcut on the screen, you can see exactly what's going on. That's actually done by a tool called Clean Shot. Let me just bring that up on screen. If I just go to a new window and I just go to Clean Shot X and I search that, you'll see that this tool is actually really, really good. And actually, considering what it can do, I think this is actually very reasonably priced. Okay, if you hit buy now, how much is it? It's $29 on one Mac, and you can obviously buy more copies. But this tool is hands down one of the best tools I've ever found on a Mac for recording the screen. Not only does it do this capability where it tells you what shortcuts are being typed, but it also does things like it will highlight the cursor. It's actually what I use to create the circle on the bottom right hand corner. At the moment, if you're seeing that on screen, it's because I've actually done that effect in post. But actually, when I'm typically recording videos, that effect is actually done by this software automatically. It's also a screenshot tool, so it's really, really good at creating screenshots. It's nice and easy. It's a great tool to use. It's one of the best tools I've ever used on a Mac. You know, when you find these pieces of software that just become invaluable and they save you a whole ton of time, this is one of those tools. So I highly encourage it. Highly recommend people actually use this tool if they're on a Mac. If you're on a Windows machine, the best tool to use is something called OBS Studio. Let me just go to the website here. And OBS Studio is a free piece of software. It's essentially for streaming content. Gamers use it to stream their streams out to YouTube and so on and so forth and Twitch. But you can actually use it to record content on your screen. If I just open it up, I don't actually have it installed on my Mac, but essentially it has a very good interface for recording the screen. And on Windows, it's actually much, much more stable than it is on a Mac, which is why I didn't recommend it for Mac OS systems. Use OBS to record content on the screen on Windows. It gives you all the settings you need, and it's really, really powerful. And it doesn't quite have the same sort of finish as Clean Shot, but the one upside is it's free, and you can create all those effects like the circle popover very easily. I'll actually put a link to the video that I used to create the circle popover in OBS when I used it. So I've shown you how to record videos on two platforms, Windows and Mac. If you're on a Linux machine, I'm sure there's software there that works. OBS also works on Linux, but Tableau desktop at least doesn't work on Linux, so you wouldn't be using that at all. Now, the next question is, okay, you record the videos, you get all the content out. What settings do you use to record the video? And this is a very passionate topic of mine. I record videos in 4K 60 frames per second. And you might initially think, that's crazy. Why are you recording 4K 60 frames per second when most laptops don't even push that resolution? Well, it's actually a complicated issue because, in fact, most laptops do actually come with very high resolution screens, but they are scaled down to a lower resolution. By that, what I mean is a laptop, for example, can have a 4K resolution, but it's scaled down to 1080p. And the reason it's scaled down to 1080p is so that the graphics can be even sharper. Essentially, the same icon will take up twice as many pixels, which then makes it super, super sharp. Now, the downside of that is if you record your content in 1080p and then someone looks at it on one of those scaled down screen, whilst you think your screen is 1080p, actually the content ends up looking fuzzy because the pixels, on the other hand, are actually operating at the 4K resolution. So the reason I record in 4K is because there are people out there with laptops that are very, very high resolution. And essentially, I don't want to have to try and figure out what the optimum resolution and detail is for all the screens in the world. I'd rather push that job to YouTube. And the only way you can do that is to give YouTube the highest quality file that you can produce, which is a 4K 60 frames per second file. Now, the other thing is, you're probably wondering, well, why the 60 frames per second? 30 frames would be good enough. And again, this is another one of these things where maybe I'm just pernickety, but your eyes can tell the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. There's no real way of me showing you this in this video because I'd have to somehow change formats in the middle of a video. And because I'm uploading it in one format, that's not going to be really easy for me to show you. But what I will say is this. If you go watch another Tableau tutorial and you then go watch one of my videos at 1080p 60 frames per second, you will notice that the mouse movements are a lot smoother. When I click on things, things don't seem to sort of lag as much. And when I go from one place to the next, you don't see this trail on the cursor. Essentially, that's called motion blur. And again, It's because most of our laptops, most of our computers, in fact, most of the technology, your phone, tablets, all operate at roughly that 60 frames per second zone. So some screens come at 50 hertz, but most screens operate at the 60 hertz space. So again, if you're publishing content to YouTube, most people do actually at 30 frames per second. That is fine, because when you're doing a video like I am face to screen, you actually want 30 frames per second. Otherwise it starts to look weird. But if you're showing screen content, and that is predominantly going to be viewed on another screen, trust me, you want 60 frames per second. So that's what I record, 4K 60 frames per second. It's really, really simple. The microphone, I use this microphone. Let me bring it up onto the screen. This is a Shure MV7. I think it's a Shure MV7. Let me just check what it is. Shure MV7. I'm pretty sure it's an MV7. It is an MV7. And it's a very interesting mic because what it does is it doesn't pick up noise as loudly as other microphones. So if you've probably seen one of these Blue Yeti mics or these Blue Snowballs, these are all great, but they're based on a technology called a condenser mic. Now, what a condenser mic does is it's very good at picking up sounds from all sorts of places. For example, if I was to drop a penny outside, it would pick it up. However, this mic doesn't do that. This actually is based on a slightly different technology where it only picks up noise from around the microphone. Let me show you how that works. So right now I'm talking on top of the microphone. This is part of something called how you sort of position yourself around a microphone. If I move it away, you'll sort of notice that my voice sounds like it's much further away. And if I keep going back and I keep going back, you should slowly hear the mic dropping off. Essentially, you should no point hear anything. But I'm actually talking at the same volume. In fact, right now I'm actually shouting to get the voice across the screen. So this is what the microphone does naturally. Now, this is not a cheap microphone. It's actually quite an expensive one, relatively speaking, but you don't need to have something like this to record good quality content. Let me show you something that is about £30 and sounds just as good. This is a lavalier mic, or lapel mic as you might know it. And essentially what it does is it just goes into your computer. It just literally goes into the microphone jack where your speakers would go. You put this in on your clip. You sort of clip it onto your face. It's kind of struggling to focus here. Let me put it closer. Let me move back and put it closer. There we go. Literally, you put it on your chest and you sort of just clip it onto your t-shirt like so. And what that will do is it will sit next to your body. Now, the reason these are so good is because they sit close to your body. It's really hard for sounds outside in the other room to basically infiltrate the microphone and interfere, because your body acts as like a sponge essentially, and it soaks up all of that sound that you can't hear. So this is a really nice, cheap way of getting into this. But again, if you've got nothing, you can just use the laptop that you've got. And all you need to do is make sure you do some very basic noise cleaning to that once you edit it, so you can get rid of any noise. Obviously, if you don't have equipment, you need to make sure that the environment is as well treated as you possibly can. That doesn't mean, buy studio foam. That just essentially means record when it's quiet, maybe put up some blankets just to dampen the sound a little bit, and you can help the acoustics a lot more. So that's exactly the recording settings I use. 4K 60 frames per second, a decent mono mic, and I try and keep things as simple as I possibly can. Now, if you're recording your laptop, it doesn't matter whether you'll have a production studio or not. This is basically going to be the best way to do it. Just record 1080p, 30 frames per second, and get the content out there. No one will honestly notice the difference, unless you're me, of course. So as you start to develop your content, just make sure you spend a bit more time increasing the quality in small ways, whether it's the audio, whether it's the refresh rate, or whether it's the screen quality. All of that is really important. There is one downside to recording content that high though, because essentially you have to edit it. So if you're doing sort of one take hero shots and that's it, then you're fine. No editing required. Upload what you record. But in my case, I do a lot of editing. So when you record a 4K 60 frames per second video, you need the computer that can actually edit that smoothly and efficiently, and then render it smoothly and efficiently to be able to get the video out. So that's something else to be aware of. Okay. We've talked about just hitting the record button, how you can record in a very basic setup. I've also showed you the tools I use if you want to go and buy some software. Other software you might know of, Camtasia Studio, Snagit, these are all great tools. I think they cost too much for what they actually offer. All you need to do is to be able to record something on your screen. And considering, Camtasia is something like $200, whereas CleanShot, which I just showed you, does exactly the same thing as $30. And I think there's a world of difference between the quality of what they capture. Although Camtasia does do some editing, I don't think you need to pay for an editing tool because other editing tools exist. I'll touch on that in a second, but that's pretty much my viewpoint. record with the cheapest software you can find, including free software. And then if you can, record it in one take, post it up to YouTube and be done with it. Okay, so I just wanted to take some time to show you some of the stuff I can't really show you on screen. So the first one is an automation that I use literally all the time, and it starts off with this device called a Stream Deck. Now, a Stream Deck is essentially this small little device with programmable little screens, and each one of those can be customized to do an action. Now, one of the actions I have is to actually get me from this setup, which is essentially my desktop setup, to a recording setup with one click. Essentially, these three buttons here on the right-hand side are essentially sort of short, quick actions that allow me to activate a bunch of different things immediately. So check out what happens to the screen as I do these things. Notice that this screen here has my desktop. If I just angle the camera away from me a little second here, you can see that this item has my desktop now. And when I hit this button, it activates, switches, and now this screen is completely clear and all the icons and everything on the desktop has gone over to the left. It leaves me with this command line terminal here, which is actually what I'm using to change everything. And I now have a screen that's ready to go. Has this one thing here, but that's just basically the audio recording. You'll also notice that the pop-up, the dock doesn't turn up here because it's all the way on the left over this side. So this is not going to interfere with any of my tutorials whatsoever. So everything is on here, nice and clean setup. When I'm done, I hit this other button here. And what that does is it switches back to my normal setup, which is actually what I use for editing. And it opens this piece of software here called Permute. And that's again, all managed by an application called Keyboard Maestro. It's essentially doing a bunch of different things. It's firing command line commands. It's also paying attention to what's going on the screen. And in some cases, I've even programmed it to do very specific things in basically a couple of clicks. So you can actually tell it to sort of do certain mouse movements and then activate those on the screen. So that automation is one of the most important ones. And then once I've finished recording, I hit that button, then I immediately hit the Premiere Pro button. And you can see it brings up Premiere Pro on the screen. So now I can start pretty much editing how I want. It sort of has this bug at the moment where it opens up in the top right corner and I can't get it back on screen. But as you can see, anything I need is instantly available on here. If there's some sort of bug or if there's anything that's not going right on my computer, I can just hit the activity monitor and it pops up straight away. And then when I'm done with all of that and I'm editing, I'm in the flow, I can just hit this button and Figma opens up ready to go. And then let's say I forget something and I need to go back to sort of recording mode, because everything opens on this screen, everything here goes to that screen when we go back to recording mode. So if I hit record, you'll see that my screen is clear again and everything is now on that window, which makes it very easy to go back and forth. A lot of time recording is spent just setting up. So if you can automate that on the desktop, then you're going to make your life a lot easier and you're going to make it fun and easy to record videos. And that's basically how everything works. The last button I haven't showed you is this red button here at the top right. And that is essentially the button where I hit record. And when I do that, it activates the screen recording setup. I choose a section of the screen, I get all the settings ready to go, and we basically start the recording. And this is how it all works. It's all driven by this little Stream Deck and everything's there. That's my GoPro going off again, unfortunately, based on my sound. And it's going off again, which is really annoying me. So that's pretty much how the whole setup works. There's not much more to it. I have a bunch of other things programmed in here. For example, if I wanted to go to YouTube Studio, I just hit this button and it opens up YouTube Studio on my page ready to go, and I can actually start editing. So this little Stream Deck is actually completely optimized around video editing, and everything on there is just for video editing. And it means I don't need to have anything about video editing on my desktop, and I can open the tools I need ready to go as and when I use it. Now you can actually set this up to do loads of other things, but I'd like to keep my automation simple. Otherwise they become work as well. And so it's really hard to work with. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is a couple of setups that I actually use on my desk and some setups you might think to use even if you've got a phone. I mentioned earlier that if you had a phone, you could basically recreate the setup that I use to get everything going. So I'll show you that now, with the first setup essentially just being a laptop and your phone camera to create the effect that I create. Okay, let's put this down, let's switch the cameras around and let's get back to it. Okay, so I'm basically sat in front of my laptop. I've got nothing else plugged in. I've got a camera to the right hand side so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. And as you can see, I've got nothing plugged in, and this is roughly the quality I can get. I'm just using the webcam from my MacBook Pro, and that's pretty much it. The exact same setup that I do my tutorials in. If I go in here and I start opening up Superstore Sales, you can see this is the exact same setup, so nothing fancy. It's very, very simple to use. And yeah, as you can see, it's very easy to do. The quality you're hearing is coming from the microphone of my MacBook Pro. So I've got nothing plugged in, I'm wearing nothing. There's nothing sort of fancy, nothing wireless. And this is just what the laptop can do. And what I'll do is I'll show you how I can treat this like this to sound a lot better. And essentially now it should sound a lot clearer. The noise should be removed and any background noise should hopefully not be coming through. So that's basically what you can do with a very, very basic setup with no equipment, essentially just your laptop, a screen, and some $20 software, and you're pretty much good to go. Okay, the webcam could be better quality, but honestly, at the size most people will be watching this content, it won't matter so much. Now I'm going to show you what you can do if you plug your phone into your laptop and increase the quality of the video that way. Okay, let's do that now. Okay, so now I'm back. I'm still recording from the laptop. The audio is just coming out of this. The only thing different is I've actually plugged in my phone, and now you can see the quality of the video is so much better. One thing that really helps if you're going to use a webcam is talking directly to the camera. Especially on an iPhone, it can be difficult to know which one is actually the camera. But essentially, if you just talk in that general direction, it just helps carry the audience a little bit when they're not looking at the content on the screen. But when you go back to your software, you can just keep doing things as you are. Again, very simple. I've just plugged in my phone via a cable. I've not even got my laptop plugged in, but you should ideally have your laptop plugged in if you're trying to get everything going. But as you can see, this is just the simplest of setups. And all that happens essentially when I sort of hook myself into a desk and a better camera is that I plug in my microphone, I plug in my camera, and the quality goes up a very small amount. But the quality between this and what you actually see on YouTube is tiny, okay? The gains we're talking about are very marginal. Your camera just allows you to do things a little bit more flexibly. So you just have to work around the limitations of what you've got and you can achieve the same results. So this is a very simple setup on a laptop. It's admittedly a MacBook Pro, but nevertheless, you can do the same on a Windows PC with the exact same software and some free screen recording tools on your laptop, okay? That's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to do, to show you two simple setups. That means anyone can honestly start making videos and then you're pretty much good to go. Okay, let's head to the next section where we talk about what happens after you've recorded the content and you need to start making it into something, the edit process. Okay, so you've recorded the content, it's now time to edit the content. Now, ideally, if you haven't got lots of equipment or you haven't got editing software and you don't want to spend time editing, then this step doesn't really matter because what you should do is try and record your content in one go. That creates some challenges because essentially you want to try and keep it as short as possible and succinct. You probably need to do some practice runs as well. And the longer the video is, the harder that's going to be. So if you're going to be doing one take shots, try and do them no longer than 10 minutes because I guarantee you after 10 minutes, you start to make more and more mistakes and it starts to become a less fun process. But if you've got access to editing software and you don't mind learning how to do basic things like cutting the video and cutting the audio, then you can do a lot more things with your video because you don't have to get it perfect the first time. Now, the other thing is when you're editing content, what you want to try and do is realize that you're actually adding another level of communication to the video. So whatever editing tool you use, you need to decide how much editing you're going to do. Are you going to do a lot to try and make it more creative, or are you just going to basically try and tell a story? In my case, I just try and tell a story. I just like to go from A to B. I'm not adding too much flair on top of it. I'm not letting anything else get in the way of what I'm showing you because it's a video tutorial. I don't think you're here for effects. I think you're mostly here to get the information and get out of the way. And if the effects get in the way of that, then in my view, then they shouldn't be there. So let me show you what I do. The first thing I do once a video is recorded is I typically open up a piece of software called Adobe Premiere Pro. Hey, it's Tim here. I'm editing this video and I realized I forgot to talk about another video editing tool called DaVinci Resolve. Now, if you're learning video editing for the very first time and you've never touched a single tool in your life, there are lots of great places to start. The first one is iMovie. iMovie is free on a Mac and so it's very, very easy to get into. Now on a Windows machine, I'd actually recommend you consider something like DaVinci Resolve, and DaVinci Resolve is also available on the Mac. Now, DaVinci Resolve is essentially free editing software that is used by people who work in Hollywood. Essentially, tools like Adobe Creative Cloud are more targeted towards people who work in marketing, sort of influencers and promo and that sort of market. DaVinci Resolve is more targeted at people who make movies for the cinema. So Hollywood uses DaVinci Resolve and they release a free version that's essentially free for everyone. And there's another paid version called Studio. Now, the funny thing is the free version works for 90% of the things you'd ever want to do in an edit. And to be honest with you, I personally could have used the free version all along for all my videos. There's nothing that I do that requires any paid feature in DaVinci Resolve. The reason I don't use it is because I've only discovered it in the last 2 years. I've known about it for a while, but I only really looked at it in the last 2 years. So I didn't want to break sort of 5 years of workflow that I'd learned through Adobe Premiere Pro. So I'm actually learning how to use DaVinci Resolve, but it's not yet worth it for me to change my workflow to that, purely because I've still got a lot of hurdles to overcome. And the only way to force myself to learn it is to use it for some edits. So every 3 or 4 videos, I basically try and do the edit in DaVinci Resolve to see how far I've come. But there's some sticking points for me, and I just haven't had time to basically go out and learn those particular sticking points and then start using it more often. But if you're thinking of getting into editing a video, you want some basic tools, you don't want to pay anything, and you want good tools, DaVinci Resolve, hands down, the best option. Unfortunately, Adobe Premiere Pro doesn't have a free version at all, so it's not a great option at all if you're trying to get into this at low cost with no effort. So I just wanted to add that in there because you know, it's very easy to, again, look at all of this stuff and really rack up the bills, as it were, of things that you might want to go and get. But for editing software, you don't have to pay any money for good tools. Go on YouTube, look at other YouTubers, they'll say exactly the same thing. DaVinci Resolve is a great tool, so consider that instead of Adobe Premiere Pro if you're starting for the first time. Otherwise, if you already use Adobe, then use the thing you already know. Now, what I'll do is I'll just create a new project. I'm not even going to do anything sort of snazzy here. I'm just going to create a new project, and what we will do is we'll just call this, I'm not going to put it in the split function. I've actually just uploaded this video. So what we'll do is we go to the desktop, hit a new folder, and we'll just do test. And we'll just call this test folder, and we'll call this project test. And I'll just show you the flow of how everything works. I don't change many of these settings. I'm not recording sort of cinema video or any sort of video production or anything. I'm just trying to get the content out essentially. And so what I do is I end up with this pretty blank template, and I go to this tab here called Tim Perfect Assembly. Now, what I have to say here is I've spent years working with Adobe Premiere Pro, so this is second nature to me, but this can look daunting for a lot of people, and especially if it's the first time you're using it. But it's really simple. Essentially here on the left, I have my videos and my design files, or everything I need. In the middle, I have my effects. On the right, I actually get to see what I'm editing. And at the bottom, I have this timeline. That's all it is. So what I'll do is I'll actually start by importing a template project. Now, this is a template project that I've created and I've mastered over a long period of time. You can see the last time I edited this was on the 5th of February, 2021, because that's the last time I needed to make a big change to the template. And what this template does, it essentially brings in a project which already has things like my introduction, my audio settings, everything already really well configured, because ultimately I use the same microphone, I record the same screen, and I use the same gear. Why would the presets change from video to video? They technically shouldn't. They maybe need a few small tweaks, but that's pretty much it. So I import everything into a project. I get some warnings about fonts. I always get those. There's a small bug in my video, but it brings in a bunch of different things. Let me just go through those. An adjustment layer, which changes how the video looks, a progress bar, an end screen, which is what you see at the very end, an export timeline. And actually, if I just double click on some of these, you can see what they look like. These are just the things that I use throughout my video, and they are there because they help me speed things up. Now, I've also got these two timelines here, main timeline and export timeline. If I open up the main timeline, you see that it has nothing in it. But if I open up the export timeline, you'll see that it already has something in it. So you're probably wondering, how can you have something when you haven't put anything into your folder? Well, yes, we haven't put anything yet. But the thing is about a template is you can put things where you need them, and then everything sort of picks up from there on. So let's just say that I'm going to go and bring some of the videos that I recorded yesterday when I was doing a video about the split function. So let's go here. Let's just go and drag this file here. I'm going to bring the MOV file, drop it in. And now that that's there, I'm just going to drop that into my timeline. You can see it coming in here. And there we go, that's our video. And now it's in our timeline, and you can see the timeline starts to come to life. And then I just start editing. Essentially, I just go in here and I just hit play and I just start listening, okay? Essentially, what I also try and do is I try and add markers. These red markers here are cutting points where either something will happen and something else will start changing, okay? So I try and move these to match things. You can know areas where I cut out whole sections of video, because you can see here, I didn't say anything. So what I do is I'll just start cutting those out. They're not really important. I know for a fact I didn't say anything meaningful, because if I'm talking, those gaps wouldn't exist. I don't even bother wasting time figuring out what's being said there. I just go ahead and cut those out. Also, there are instances where I start the video multiple times. So I'll go here, I'll say something, I think I'll mess it up, and then I'll go back here and start again. So I'm fairly certain that at least this first one here is not me saying anything useful. And so I've immediately cut out about 10 minutes of bump just because they weren't useful. And now what I'll start to do is I'll start to edit this. I'll start to work with this. It's really hard for me to show you here unless I have actually something real that I need to edit. So what I did is I created a time lapse of the editing process, so I could just show you how that works really, really quickly. I'm not going to sort of do anything cool, but what I will do is I will just quickly open this in QuickTime, bring it on screen here, and then we can see how it works. So this is exactly the editing process I took the other day, including this window that you might have seen before where I have all the videos. Okay, it has a few other steps in there, but essentially, if I just sort of play through this, what will happen here, if I just scrub through this, I will get the content and I'll put it into my transcoder here in Permute. Permute is essentially a transcoder that changes the file type so that I can edit a little bit faster towards the end of the editing process. So in parallel, whilst I'm editing, something else is happening so that at the end of the process, I can get a faster output at the very, very end. It sounds a little bit weird, but it's there. I won't go into this command line. What it's essentially doing is it's changing the settings of my screen so it's ready for recording. That's all it's doing. It's using a command line tool to do that. If I keep going across, you'll see that I actually get into the body of the video. But what I will do before I do that is I will also create a screenshot here. So what I'm doing here is creating a screenshot, and this will help for my thumbnail a little later on. I'll show you how that works. So you can see the section of the screen that I'm actually recording in this particular case. If we keep going forward, you'll see that I open up the project and I go ahead and import the files as I did today. And so you can also see that I got invitation to the Tableau Ambassador and Zen Master meeting there, but I think I kind of scrubbed through that very quickly. And here I bring in all the files that I've just shown you, including this timeline. You can see that it's hazed out. And all I basically start doing is start editing it. And I just work my way through each and every minute of the content. And so essentially, if I record a 20-minute video, I need to watch it for at least 20 minutes if I'm editing it. And it will take slightly longer because I'll do things like this, where I'll cut out sections, I'll zoom in just to make it easier. So what's going on here explicitly, if I just go back, I'm choosing a section of the video, I'm cutting it out, and then I'm zooming in. You can just see that happening here on the top right. Then I'm placing that zoom in a place that makes sense. And then once that's done, I'm moving on to the next section. So I manually insert things like those zooms, because then it means I don't have to remember to do it whilst I'm recording, and it just gets applied to the edit. So when I get to the end, I've basically done this a bunch of times. And now this is when the magic happens. Once I've edited that first version, what then happens is I switch over to my export timeline, which is like a nested timeline. So the main timeline is its own timeline. I bring all the new content into that. I edit and cut it, but I don't do anything fancy. Then I go over to my export timeline, and my export timeline contains my main timeline, and that saves me a lot of time. So essentially what that means is I've got all the things I need ready to go. I've even got things like the titles, the banner, the progress bar that I have on the screen. Everything is already configured, and they just need tweaking to match this particular video. So if I go ahead and just scroll through this, you can see that the title here for this is wrong. It's using the template from the ZN function video. That's actually when I created this template. And I basically just start editing this and just trying to make this a lot better. And as I do that, all I'm now doing is I'm adding the flair. So at this point, I could actually upload the video to YouTube, but I'm not going to, because essentially, I've still got a lot of work to do in terms of the things I'd like to add to the video that I feel will help you, the viewer, understand what's going on. So that includes the progress bar. There's a little red progress bar that goes across the bottom of the video. In fact, it's going across the screen right now. If you don't see it, I've probably forgotten to put it in, but I'm 100% certain it's there. That shows you how long this section has left, essentially. And for people who notice it, they find it valuable. And if you don't notice it, great, because it's not supposed to be something that takes over the whole screen. And I basically add those in. I add editing points, I add things like titles, and then I make sure that the music goes till the very end. I go in and I tweak the audio. Now, this is not something that I have to do all the time, but for example, in hot weather, I will sound different to cold weather. in certain situations. Let's say it's been raining a lot, the room will sound a little bit more damp. So I'll need to come in here and tweak these settings ever so slightly. And I'm not going to go into detail about this. This is basically very basic voice editing things that I do. I just try and make things sound a little bit smoother. I don't try and I don't try and change my voice in any way. I'm just trying to accentuate the actual frequencies where my voice sits, so my voice is even clearer. And those gains come back to help us a little later on when YouTube then tries to do transcription on this, because the clearer your voice, the easier it is for it to do better quality transcriptions. And so as we play through this, you'll see the last thing I'll do is I'll look at the sound. I'll also make sure there's not much echo. I record in a small room. I do have some sort of noise dampening devices on the wall, but they don't do a studio quality job. So I do the rest in post, because I know that they can reduce the levels of noise down a little bit, dampen the echo a little bit, and then in post I can remove nearly all of it. And so I go in there and remove the noise. And we have a pretty full timeline. We're ready to export this video and we're pretty much ready to go. Now, what I'll do is I'll hit the export button and you'll see this interface. I'll label the video. I'll even mark the things I need to mark for YouTube, because when Adobe Premiere Pro finishes, it will push this off to the cloud and YouTube will start ingesting it essentially. So this is all done inside of the software. I'd rarely actually go to YouTube and manually upload a video. It's mostly done directly out of the software in this particular case. And so now as I play through this video, you'll see that the next thing I do is I cue the video. So if I just go back, I hit Q rather than export. So let me just go one frame here. You'll see that this Q button is pressed here. And essentially what that does is it sends the video to another piece of software, which will then start rendering it so that you can see the final output. Okay, so that will pretty much go on as it is. And you'll see that this is the software open. I'll save the file. I'll actually archive it. I'll take all the files, put it on my external hard drive. And as we play through this, you'll see that now the video renders very, very slowly, but it's there and it renders. And that can take a long time. For a typical 10-minute 4K 60 frames per second video, that can take about 40 minutes to render. So this video, for example, really cutting it fine. I don't think it will actually render in time for when I said I'd post it. So I'm hoping I can edit this really quickly and get it out there super, super fast. Okay, so that's pretty much the editing process. Now, you don't need to edit videos to this level and standard. This is just something I do to make my videos stand out from other people. You could put your video up without any of the flourishes that I do. And so I don't want you to look at this and see, oh, this is the level of standard that I have to do to put content on YouTube. You don't. People will still watch content on YouTube, even if it's not this good. Let me just show you some examples of that. When I first started doing this, I didn't have anything like the equipment I have today. It was an absolute, challenge for me, because I was someone who always prided myself on sort of my content. And so I just pause myself there. If I just go to my videos and I just go to the video uploads, I just go to the very first videos I ever recorded. Let's just go all the way back, scroll all the way down, and these are still public for the record. The very first video I recorded 10 years ago was this video about Adobe InDesign, okay? And if you're on my channel, go and watch this video and just see and listen how bad the quality of the audio is. I even did some noise cancelling in this video. And it's awful. It literally kills my soul every time I hear it. But guess what? 83,000 people have found it useful and have watched it. 304 have even thanked me enough for the lack of noise cancellation. And 8 people have probably, died inside just listening to that thing. But I recorded this video on 5th of April, 2010. I learned something about Adobe InDesign and I shared this out and I thought, wow, this is amazing. Look at this. People really enjoy having content that helps them. So I did it again. I did it on another video showing people how to install a piece of software. I did it again for typography. And long story short, I was creating these videos that were getting tens of thousands of people interested, and I had no equipment. I used none of this. And they're actually some of the best viewing numbers I've had. Yes, they've had 10 years to get there, but it just shows that people will enjoy content regardless of what's going on, okay? My layout container videos to this day is still watched. Roughly 50 to 100 people watch this every day. I used a piece of software called Camtasia here to record it. And so it is slightly better and it's slightly sharper, but the audio is no different. It's just as bad. And so you can sort of see the quality of everything. And it's taken me a while. At least the thing I did do here was I recorded it in 1080p, which, 6 years ago was actually quite hard to do and upload. It took a lot of effort and time. So I don't even know how I mustered that. But nevertheless, you don't need great quality equipment to record good content. You can also see that I've been doing this for a while. So over the 4 years, if you literally go back across my channel, you'll see that I didn't even do things like focus on the thumbnail. All of that stuff is just stuff that I've developed over time. I even did vlogging at one stage when I went to the Austin conference in Texas. And, I learned a lot about vlogging. I learned that that was really hard to do and it wasn't worth the time. Maybe in the future, I might do something more targeted just for conference. But yeah, it was really hard to do a vlog. And then I realized maybe I can do something around the new product features in Tableau, and then you can start to see a pattern evolve. I started making videos about new features, and that was my jam. I found my niche, and that's exactly what I've started doing over time. And that's pretty much it. Now, the reason I've been talking for a while is because when you upload a video, that's not the job done. In fact, there's actually a lot more left to do still, especially for YouTube. So the last thing to do is the thumbnail. Now the thumbnail is really fun. I find this really fun. Essentially, I have a template. Now the template itself has a story, but let me show you the template first. So this is actually where I create all my thumbnails. I have a Figma template, and believe it or not, I have actually sat in front of a green screen and taken a bunch of different emotions and recorded them and basically removed the green screen out of them. Now, I discovered really quickly that doing these every single time I was going to do a video was actually much harder than doing them all in one go. I did actually try this. I took a photo of myself, then realized I needed to cut out the background, then realized that was just, never going to work every single time. It actually took me half an hour the first time to edit out the background. So if you want to know how I actually did this, I created a little bit of a process around it because, of course, you have to do these things. If I go to the Dropbox folder and I go to my assets and I go to profile pics and I go to chroma key pics, you'll see that I actually have a folder of images which are just green essentially. So if I just open this window, you'll see that I've taken a bunch of photos. It's a bit narcissistic, but nevertheless, yes, I stood in front of a camera, in front of a green screen, pretending to react to emotions, which I was inspired by in emoji. So I basically went to the emoji section, looked at a few expressions and just tried to recreate them. So if we take let's take a reasonable one. I don't want to take one that sounds silly. Let's take this one. We open it up in Photoshop, and it took me half an afternoon to figure out how to do this. Literally 2 hours spent in Photoshop to do the following process. And I learned just by going on YouTube, finding a blog, and essentially I found a blog that showed me how to turn this into a green screened image. Now, the difficult thing with this is it leaves lots of artifacts and so on and so forth. So what I did is I obviously created an actions. Now, where's my actions window? Here we go. If I just bring this action window here, so you can see that a little bit more clearly, actually. Let's bring it to the top and bring everything down. Okay, I actually have this action right here. So if I just hit Control A, this is a tool called Presentify, by the way. It's a really great annotation tool. You can do it whilst recording as well. So this little action here is a green screen tool. And if you just look at this, I read a blog and it turned out that removing the green screen color here accurately actually was quite a few number of steps. I think I counted something like 45 to 50 steps in total. And so if I go over here, select that action, and then I click run on that action, because I figured it out once, I recorded the steps, I turned it into an automation in Photoshop, and now I can do it pretty much on the fly. Is it perfect? No, but at the scale you're going to see it, it's never going to matter. And then what I did is this automation actually automatically saves the output. One of the last things it does is it saves the output. So I pretty much sat there and opened 50 files because I couldn't figure out how to make a script that ran all the files through Photoshop. So I just opened every single file, tapped this automation once, and before you knew it, I had a folder of all the different expressions I could pull. And the thing is, once they're done, they go into this folder. So they go into this folder called processed. And if you look in here, you actually see that the most recent one here was today at 8:37. So you can see here, the day 7th of Feb, which is when I also made that template, is the last time I actually took a bunch of photos. And I've done a few others since, but that's when they were all done. And then once that's all done, it goes into Figma. And then in Figma, what I do is I basically spend another sort of essentially half a day creating a template for my thumbnails, because thumbnails on YouTube are a funny thing. I'm not sure about the science of this, but every YouTuber will basically tell you that you need to have a face, you need to have a title, and you need to have a brand really clearly displayed. So I built a template that I thought was that. I could probably spend more time doing it, but essentially, let's say we're creating a new video. I'll just come in here and I'll call this test video, okay? And we will just go in here and change that to that. I will say I'll add some sort of context. I'll select this triangle, and then we're pretty much ready to go. Now, the software image, I normally take that from Tableau. So if I just delete that, what I will normally then do is go to the screenshot I took earlier on, where I basically took a picture of Tableau right after I did the demo, and I'll drop it into the software. And then once that's done, I'll drag it into the right position. So in this case, it just needs to go here. I'll make it a little bit larger. Then I need to drop it lower inside of the view. And now it's there. I'm now ready to go. Now, sometimes the spacing isn't perfect. So what I'll do is I'll just sort of space this out. I'll try and sort of find that sweet spot where it's just large enough, but also that it's there. Now, the other thing I'll do is then I'll choose a face to kind of go with this. So if I just come out here and maybe let's choose this face here. So let's just grab that. I normally just grab them and then drop them in. And once I've done that, we're not done yet, because of course this doesn't look natural, because essentially there's no sort of shadow. So it just looks like I'm flat on the screen. So what I'll then do is I'll then grab that, add an effect of a drop shadow, go into the drop shadow itself, increase the x-axis sort of distance. You can sort of see the shadow popping out there, increase the blur a lot more, then make it a lot darker so that it looks more like a shadow. Then sometimes I might actually increase the blur even more. But what that does is it just gives it a little bit of depth, and it makes it look like I'm in front of the screen. And actually I can sort of do this because I can sort of imagine the light is coming from the top down. So if you shift the x-axis across and down, it gives it a little bit of diagonality, and it's sort of in the opposite direction to the titles. The titles have the shadow going that way, and there's a little bit of symmetry with my shadows going in the other direction towards the bottom right. And then I always try and make sure that the focal point of the thumbnail is actually what I want you to see. So these eyes, I'll normally move this here so that it makes a lot more sense. But obviously this is not great because it's not a long title, but typically the title would sort of be up here and I'm looking at that. And so you're sort of drawn to what I'm looking at. That's exactly how it works. And then once that's done, I just go into the desktop here, export the general, and I have my thumbnail ready to go. So if I go back into my test folder, I'll just hit thumbnail. And we're basically done. That is the thumbnail ready to go. Once that's done, we then go off to YouTube, and essentially there's a whole sort of process around YouTube. It's actually quite easy. It's quite an easy thing to do. But what I'll do is I'll show you a video that I'm actually waiting to sort of I'm waiting for it to sort of get produced. And if I just go into content here, and then I go into this one here, you see all the sort of necessary stuff that I have to fill out. So I have to fill out a title, a description. I can see the rendering process for HD and 4K. 4K takes forever. HD takes a long time in my case because I have a 4K clip. Otherwise, this video would be live already. It's nearly 9 o'clock and this video was supposed to go out 4 or 5 hours ago, but for whatever reason, the high definition and 4K version just haven't rendered in time. You don't get to control that. That's just YouTube for you. The standard definition version launches. So you know what? I might just make this public anyway very soon, but I have the thumbnails here. I'll go in, change the thumbnails. I'll give it a playlist title. I'd add an end screen if necessary. It's essentially the ending that you see. And so this overlays onto the graphic that you see sometimes that I add. So that's how this works. There's a template layer and then there's an overlay on top. And that is pretty much it. I mean, I say that's pretty much it. I've been talking for a long while. But yes, that is the start to end process of making a video. Okay. Now, just to finish this video off, there are a couple of things that I haven't covered, and they essentially revolve around sort of making things go faster, okay? And part of the video editing process is actually just optimizations, and that is a really hard thing to convey because it doesn't make the video. You don't see the output of that in the video. But what it does do is it means that I can spend less time making adjustments and more time making videos. Okay, so we're pretty much done. That's pretty much everything that I could think to fit in the video. It's a very long one, so thank you so much for your patience. I really, really appreciate it. If you've got any questions, the comments are the place to go. Please drop them in the comments, or if you're on social media, just tweet me directly and we're more than happy to reply. I try to get to messages when I can, but if I don't, then the best way to do it is just ask publicly, because then someone else can also answer the question if they know the answer. But apart from that, thanks for watching. Thanks for your patience. I hope I've inspired some of you to make videos. I hope I haven't put you off. If you do start a channel about Tableau, let me know in the comments below, and I will do the best I can to try and support you and share your channel as much as I possibly can. And if you get in touch on LinkedIn or Twitter, by all means get in touch. I'm happy to have a screen share session and go through some of this in more detail and help you organize your content. So the first thing to do though is to make a video and put it in the comments. That is the only caveat, because it's very easy to have chats with people who are thinking about making content, but actually the most important step is making that first video.